E aí, gurizada, eu tô aqui com o Julian Gerighty, diretor criativo da Ubisoft pro jogo Star Wars Outlaws, que já tá chegando. So, Julian, my first question to you is, what inspired you to create an open world game, and how did you pitch this idea to Lucasfilm?
I think Massive Entertainment, who's behind Star Wars Outlaws, has always been known for open world games. So very much thinking along the lines of what our skill set as developers was and expanding on that. So we went to Lucasfilm with that first idea, and the second was the player fantasy of actually making a scoundrel or an outlaw game. So open world and outlaw. Those were the two ideas that we pitched to Lucasfilm Games.
How was the first response to that idea to be the first open world game in the franchise?
Super exciting. Lucasfilm Games has always wanted to do a scoundrel game and an open world game. So it's a very natural agreement very early on in the process.
And where did you start when crafting an original story in such a rich multimedia universe?
So it was Lucasfilm Games who suggested the era for Star Wars Outlaws. Because when we pitched them the idea, they were thinking a little bit, and then they decided, there is this 1 year period between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, where all of the criminal syndicates, the shady operators, the underworld of Star Wars are at the highest of their powers. And that's where we decided, yes, let's go for that classic trilogy, which is great because I was a big fan of that classic trilogy.
And what were the main inspirations behind the new characters, especially the main protagonist, K-Vess?
I think it's more thinking about who the character is and what their journey is going to be. So we know that they're going to be an outlaw, but we wanted them to be somebody very different from Han Solo or Lando. So we wanted to make her relatable in the way that she isn't a perfect outlaw. She isn't very cool. She's a little bit clumsy, she's a street thief, but all of a sudden, because of her personality, a little bit reckless, a little bit confident, going and meeting with Jabba the Hutt, with Lady Kira, with all of these high-level factions. And that's the really exciting part of this story, is to take somebody that's a street thief and make them into an outlaw.
How challenging was it to design new creatures and ships in a visually iconic universe like Star Wars?
I think that's the beauty of the job. The responsibility of working within Star Wars and doing new things for that universe is a huge responsibility, but it's also an incredible achievement for the team. So it's, bucket list type of things.
I mean, in that team about the responsibility, how do you balance creating something new while respecting the legacy of this franchise?
I think the legacy comes from understanding Star Wars and taking things like Tatooine and putting them in the game. Creating something new is like taking Toshara, the moon that we have, or the characters that we're talking about, or even Nyx, the species that we created for Star Wars Outlaws. All of those things are a mix of what's canon and established and familiar, and what's completely new. And mixing them up is the joy of making this game.
The game features a dynamic gameplay experience such as an action RPG, a stealth, space combat. What was the creative process like for developing all of this in one game, and what criteria did you use for UX and UI decisions?
It's a great question. Starting with the easiest, highest level answer, the thing is that we want to bring to life fantasy. And the fantasy is that of an outlaw in Star Wars. So what does that mean in terms of gameplay? It means guns, but it means sneaking, because the Empire is around and you're not going to take the Empire on one person with a blaster. It means vehicles, it means an open world, it means spaceships, it means space. So all of those things are completely coherent within the idea of what Star Wars is and should be. In terms of UX and UI, what we wanted to do for UI is to keep things as natural and as clean as possible. And for UX, It was a challenge because we wanted to create a game where you were in charge of where you wanted to go and how you wanted to do things. But we wanted to give a little bit of indication of those things too. But accessibility settings will be there to guide you and to ease your choice, whether you want the challenge to be a little bit harder or a little bit easier.
And what was the development process for the DLCs, and how much will these new contents add to the game base?
We're still working on the DLCs, so they're brand new adventures that take the characters on new places to see new people. One of them is based around Sabak. It's a high-stakes Sabak sort of tournament that you have to infiltrate. And the other one is meeting Hondo. So it's really pushing the space pirate fantasy.
And what can you tell us about the Lando apparition and about this balance that you mentioned before and bringing back the legacy, but in a new context?
Yep. So Lando is a character that we know from the original trilogy, that we've seen. He's active during this period. And of course, if you're a scoundrel, if you're an outlaw, you're going to cross paths with other outlaws. So it's very natural that in the main game, the game that releases in next week, you'll be able to meet Lando as well.
Nice, really nice. So lastly, what would you say to Star Wars fan, and you can look to the camera, about why they should check out the game?
Well, I think if you're a fan of open world games, if you're a fan of high stakes adventures, if you're a fan of Star Wars, this is a game that's worth stepping into, because you'll be able to live the adventure of a scoundrel accompanied by your best friend Nix and your minder ND5 in a way that you've never seen a Star Wars game done before.
Julian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Pessoal, se gostaram aqui dessa entrevista, se inscrevam no canal para mais conteúdos como esse. A gente está aqui na Gamescom, direto da Alemanha, então vem muito mais conteúdos por aí. Já se inscrevam e deixem o like aqui nesse vídeo.